Hello. Hey, quarantine story time friends. It's War and Peace time, or it was an hour ago. It's been a kind of a mopey day, and I wasn't paying attention to the time, and now people are sleeping, taking naps, and so I'm trying to be quiet. And so I don't have my usual chair, my usual setup. Ugh. So it's quarantine story time from a separate room. And I'm late, an hour late. Sorry, guys. Normally we're here at 3 for those of you who are joining for the first time. And those of you who have come back, thanks for bearing with me being an hour late. So that's kind of the bad news, that and this squeaky ass chair. The good news is we have moved into part 3, which I hope I named this right. Oh well. Part 3 of Volume 1 of War and Peace. So we're just trucking along. And so we're just going to read section 1 of that today. So where we left off was after the aftermath of the battle, the Russian forces, and Prince Andrei sticking up for the artillerist, Captain Tushin, and young Nikolai Rostov has a wounded arm and is sitting lonely by a campfire, wishing for the days when everybody liked him and life wasn't so difficult. Very relatable. And yeah, so part 3, I believe, jumps back into Russian society. So without further ado, since I'm already very late, we'll just jump right in. Part 3, Section 1. Prince Vasili did not think out his plans. Still less did he think of doing people harm in order to profit from it. He was simply a man of the world who succeeded in the world and made a habit of that success. According to his circumstances and his intimacy with people, he constantly formed various plans and schemes which he himself was not quite aware of, but which constituted all the interests of his life. He would have not one or two of these plans and schemes going, but dozens, of which some were only beginning to take shape for him, while others were coming to completion and still others were abolished. He did not say to himself, for instance, "Here is a man who is now in power. I must gain his trust and friendship, and through him arrange for myself the payment of a one-time subsidy." Nor did he say to himself, "Here Pierre is rich. I must entice him to marry my daughter and borrow the 40,000 that I need from him." But let him meet a man in power, and in that same moment his instinct would tell him that that man might be useful, and Prince Vasili would become intimate with him, and at the first opportunity, without any preparation, instinctively would flatter him, behave familiarly, and talk about what was needed. He had Pierre at hand in Moscow, and Prince Vasili arranged for him an appointment as a gentleman of the bedchamber, which was then equal to the rank of state councillor, and insisted that the young man should go with him to Petersburg and stay in his house. As if absent-mindedly, and at the same time with an indubitable assurance that it had to be so, Prince Vasili did everything necessary to have Pierre marry his daughter. If Prince Vasili had thought out his plans beforehand, he would not have had such naturalness in his dealings and such simplicity and familiarity in his relations with all people, whether of higher or lower station than himself. Something constantly drew him to people more powerful or richer than he, and he was endowed with the rare art of seizing the precise moment when he should and could make use of people. Pierre, on unexpectedly becoming a rich man and Count Bezúkhov, felt himself, after his recent solitary and carefree life, so surrounded, so taken up, that it was only in bed that he managed to remain alone with himself. He had to sign papers, communicate with government offices, of whose significance he had no clear notion, ask his chief steward about something, go to his estate near Moscow, and receive a host of persons who formerly did not even care to know of his existence, but who now would be hurt and chagrined if he did not wish to see them. All these various persons, business connections, relations, acquaintances, were equally well and benignly disposed towards the young heir. They were all obviously and indubitably convinced of Pierre's high merits. He so constantly heard the words, with your extraordinary kindness, or with your excellent heart, or you yourself, Count, are so pure, or if he were as intelligent as you are, and so on, that he was sincerely beginning to believe in his extraordinary kindness and his extraordinary intelligence, the more so because, deep in his heart, it had always seemed to him that he really was very kind and very intelligent. Even people who had formerly been wicked and obviously hostile became affectionate and loving with him. The angry older princess, with the long waist and hair slicked down like a doll's, came to Pierre's room after the funeral. Lowering her eyes and blushing constantly, she told him that she was very sorry about the past misunderstandings between them, and that she now felt she had no right to ask for anything except permission, after the blow she had suffered, to stay on for a few weeks in the house in which she had loved so much and sacrificed so much. She could not help herself and wept at these words. Touched to see this statue-like princess could change so much, Pierre took her by the hand and apologized, not knowing for what himself. Since that day the princess had begun to knit a striped scarf for Pierre and was totally changed towards him. Do it for her, mon cher. After all, she suffered much from the deceased, Prince Vasili said to him, handing him some papers to sign for the princess's benefit. Prince Vasili had decided that they had to throw this bone, a promissory note for 30,000, to the poor princess, so that she would not take it into her head to talk about Prince Vasili's part in the affair of the inlaid portfolio. Pierre had signed the promissory note, and since then the princess had become still kinder. The younger sisters also became affectionate with him, especially the youngest, the pretty one with the little mole, who often confused Pierre with her smiles and her own confusion on seeing him. It seemed so natural to Pierre that everyone should love him. It would have seemed so unnatural if someone did not love him, that he could not help believe in the sincerity of the people around him. Besides, he had no time to ask himself about the sincerity or insincerity of these people. He was constantly busy. He constantly felt himself in a strange state of mild and merry intoxication. He felt himself the center of some important general movement, felt that something was constantly expected of him, that if he were to fail to do this or that, he would upset many people and deprive them of what they expected. But if he were to do this or that, all would be well, and he did what was demanded of him, and this well always remained ahead of him. More than anyone else during this time, it was Prince Vasili who took possession both of Pierre's affairs and of Pierre himself. Since the death of Count Bezúkhov, he never let Pierre out of his hands. Prince Vasili had the look of a man burdened by affairs, weary, exhausted, but finally unable, out of compassion, to leave to the mercies of fate and of swindler this helpless youth, his friend's son, après tout, and with such an immense fortune. In those few days he spent in Moscow after Count Bezúkhov's death, he summoned Pierre to him and went to him himself and prescribed for him what was to be done in such a tone of weariness and assurance, as if he were adding each time, Vous savez que suis accable d'affaires et que ce n'est pas que par pure charité que je m'occupe de vous, et pour vous savez bien que ce que je vous propose est la seule chose faisable. Well, my friend, tomorrow we're off at last, he said to him one day, closing his eyes, fingering Pierre's elbow, and in such a tone as if what he said had been decided between them long, long ago, and could not have been changed otherwise. Tomorrow we're off. I'm giving you a place in my carriage. I'm very glad. We've finished everything that matters here. I should have left long ago. I have received this from the Chancellor. I solicited him on your behalf, and you've been enrolled in the diplomatic corps and made a gentleman of the bedchamber. Now the diplomatic path is open to you. Despite all the force of the weary and assured tone in which those words were uttered, Pierre, who had been thinking for so long about his career, was about to object. But Prince Vasili interrupted him in that cooing, bass-voiced tone which precluded the possibility of interrupting his speech and which he made use of in cases requiring extreme persuasiveness. Mais, mon cher, I did it for myself, for my conscience, and there's nothing to thank me for. No one ever complained about being loved too much. And besides, you're free, you can drop it tomorrow. You'll see everything for yourself in Petersburg, and it's a long since time that you distanced yourself from these terrible memories. Prince Vasili sighed. Yes, yes, dear heart, and let these my valet ride in your carriage. Ah, I nearly forgot, Prince Vasili added. You know, mon cher, I have some accounts with the deceased, so I'll keep what I received from Ryazan. You don't need it. We'll work it out later. What Prince Vasili referred to as received from Ryazan was several thousand in quitrent, which Prince Vasili kept for himself. In Petersburg, just as in Moscow, an atmosphere of affectionate, loving people surrounded Pierre. He could not refuse the post, or rather, the rank, because he did nothing, that Prince Vasili had provided with him, and the acquaintances, invitations, social occupations were so many that Pierre experienced, even more than in Moscow, a feeling of fogginess, hurriedness, and some ever approaching but never attained good. Of his former bachelor company, many were not in Petersburg. The guards had left on campaign. Dolokhov had been demoted. Anatoly was in the army in the provinces. Prince Andrei was abroad, and therefore Pierre had no chance either to spend the nights as he had liked to spend them before, or to ease his heart in a friendly conversation with an older, respected friend. All his time was spent on dinners, balls, and mostly at Prince Vasili's, in the company of the old fat princess, his wife, his wife, and the beautiful Helene. Anna Pavlovna Scherer, like the others, manifested to Pierre the change that had occurred in society's view of him. Formerly, in Anna Pavlovna's presence, Pierre had constantly felt that what he said was improper, tactless, out of place, that his remarks, which seemed clever to him when he was preparing them in his imagination, became stupid as soon as he spoke them out loud, and that, on the contrary, the dullest remark of Hippolyte came out as clever and pleasing. Now everything he said came out as charmant. Even if Anna Pavlovna did not say it, he could see that she wanted to say it and only restrained herself out of respect for his modesty. In the beginning of the winter of 1805 to 1806, Pierre received the customary pink note from Anna Pavlovna with an invitation to which was added, Vous trouvez chez moi la belle Hélène qu'on ne se laisse jamais voir. Reading this passage, Pierre felt for the first time that between him and Hélène some sort of connection had been formed, recognized by other people, and this thought at the same time frightened him, as if an obligation had been laid upon him which he could not fulfill, and also pleased him as an amusing supposition. The soiree at Anna Pavlovna's was the same as the first, only the novelty that Anna Pavlovna was now treating her guests to was not Mortemont, but a diplomat who had come from Berlin and brought the freshest details about the Emperor Alexander's visit to Potsdam, and the two august friends swearing an indissoluble union in defending the right cause against the enemy of the human race. Pierre was received by Anna Pavlovna with a tinge of sorrow, which obviously referred to the fresh loss that had befallen the young man, the death of Count Bezúkhov. Everyone constantly considered it their duty to convince Pierre that he was very grieved by the death of a father he had hardly known. And the sorrow was of the same sort as that supreme sorrow which was expressed at the mention of the august Empress Maria Fedorovna. Pierre felt flattered by it. Anna Pavlovna arranged the circles in her drawing-room with her usual artfulness. The circle where Prince Vasili and the generals had use of the diplomat. Another circle was formed by the tea-table. Pierre wanted to join the first, but Anna Pavlovna, who was in the excited state of a commander on the battlefield when thousands of brilliant new thoughts come along, which one scarcely had time to bring to fulfillment, Anna Pavlovna, seeing Pierre, touched his sleeve with her finger. Attendez, je dis, vous sur vous pour ce soir. She glanced at Hélène and smiled at him. Ma bonne Hélène, elle fait que vous soyez charitable pour moi, pauvre tante, qui a une adoration pour vous. Allez-lui tenir compagnie pour 10 minutes. And so that it wouldn't be too boring for you, here you have the dear Count who will not refuse to follow you. The beauty went to the aunt, but Anna Pavlovna kept Pierre by her, making it look as though she had to give some last necessary instructions. She's ravishing, isn't she? She said to Pierre, pointing to the majestic beauty as she sailed off. Et quelle tenue! What a tact for such a young girl, and what a masterly ability to behave. It comes from the heart. Happy the one to whom she will belong. With her, even the most unworldly husband will involuntarily and effortlessly occupy a brilliant place in society. Isn't that so? I only wanted to know your opinion, and Anna Pavlovna let Pierre go. Pierre was sincere in answering affirmatively Anna Pavlovna's question about the artfulness of Hélène's behavior. If he had ever thought about Hélène, he would have thought precisely about her beauty and that extraordinary calm ability of hers to be silently dignified in society. The aunt received the two young people in her corner, but, it seemed, wished to hide her adoration of Hélène, and rather wished to show her face before Anna Pavlovna. She glanced at her niece as if asking what she was to do with these people. As she was leaving them, Anna Pavlovna again touched Pierre's sleeve with her finger and said, "J'espère que vous ne direz plus continue chez moi," and she glanced at Hélène. Hélène smiled with an air that said she did not allow the possibility that anyone could see her and not feel adoration. The aunt cleared her throat, swallowed her saliva, and said in French that she was very glad to see Hélène, and then she turned to Pierre with the same greeting and the same mien. In the middle of the boring and faltering conversation, Hélène glanced at Pierre and smiled at him that serene, beautiful smile which she smiled at everyone. Pierre was so used to that smile, it said so little to him that he did not pay any attention to it. The aunt was just then about a collection of snuff boxes. The aunt was talking just then about a collection of snuff boxes that had belonged to Pierre's late father, Count Bezukhov, and she showed her own snuff box. Princess Hélène asked to see the portrait of the aunt's husband, which was painted on this snuff box. "It must be the work of Venise," said Pierre, naming a famous miniaturist, leaning towards the table in order to take the snuff box in his hands and listening to the conversation at the other table. He got up, wishing to go around, but the aunt handed him the snuff box right over Hélène, behind her back. Hélène leaned forward so as to make room, and smiling, glanced around. As always at soirees, she was wearing a gown in the fashion of the time, quite open in the front and back. Her bust, which had always looked like marble to Pierre, was now such a short distance from him that he could involuntarily make out, with his near-sighted eyes, the living loveliness of her shoulders and neck, so close to his lips that he had only to lean forward a little to touch her. He sensed the warmth of her body, the smell of her perfume, and the creaking of her corset as she breathed. He saw not her marble beauty, which made one with her gown. He saw and sensed all the loveliness of her body, which were merely covered by clothes. And once he had seen it, he could not see otherwise, as we cannot return to a once exposed deception. She turned, looked straight at him with her shining dark eyes, and smiled. "So you never noticed how beautiful I am. So you never noticed before how beautiful I am," Hélène seemed to say. "You never noticed that I am a woman. Yes, I am a woman who could belong to anyone, even you," said her gaze. And at that moment Pierre felt that Hélène not only could, but must be his wife, that it could not be otherwise. He knew it at that moment as certainly as he would have known it standing at the altar with her. How it would be and when, he did not know. He did not even know whether it would be good. He even felt that it was not good for some reason, but he knew that it would be. Pierre lowered his eyes, raised them again, and wanted to see her once more as a distant alien beauty, the way he had seen her every day before then. But he could no longer do so. Could not, just as a man who once looked at a stalk of tall grass in the midst and saw it as a tree, can look at a stalk of grass itself, and once more see it as a tree. She was terribly close to him. She already had power over him, and there was no longer any obstruction between them except for the obstruction of his own will. "Bon, je vous laisse dans votre petit coin. Je veux que vous y êtes très bien," said the voice of Anna Pavlovna. And Pierre, trying fearfully to recall whether he had done anything reprehensible, blushed and looked around him. It seemed to him that everyone knew what had happened to him as well as he did. A short time later, when he went up to the larger circle, Anna Pavlovna said to him, "On dit que vous embellissez votre maison de Petersburg." It's true, the architect had said it was needed, and Pierre, not knowing why himself, was redecorating his enormous house in Petersburg. "C'est bien, mais ne déménagez pas de chez le prince Vasili. Il est bon d'avoir un ami comme le prince," she said, smiling at Prince Vasili. "Je ne sais quelque chose, n'est-ce pas? And you are still so young. You need advice. You're not angry with me for exercising an old woman's rights. She paused, as women always pause and wait for something after referring to their age. If you get married, that's another matter. And she united them in a single glance. Pierre did not look at Helene, nor she at him, but she was still just as terribly close to him. He mumbled something and blushed. On returning home, Pierre could not fall asleep for a long time, thinking about what had happened to him. And what had happened to him? Nothing. He had simply realized that a woman he had known as a child, of course he used to say distractedly, yes, good looking, when told about that Helene was a beauty, had realized that this woman could belong to him. But she's stupid. I've said myself that she's stupid, he thought. That isn't love. On the contrary, there's something vile in the feeling she aroused in me, something forbidden. I've been told that her brother Anatoly was in love with her, and she with him, and there was a whole story, and that's why Anatoly was sent away. Ippolit is her brother. Prince Vasili is her father. It's not good, he thought. But while he was arguing like that, these arguments were left unfinished. He caught himself smiling and was aware that a whole series of arguments had floated up from behind the others, that he was at the same time thinking about her worthlessness and dreaming of how she would be his wife, how she might come to love him, how she might be quite different, and how everything he had thought and heard about her might be untrue. And again he saw her not as some daughter of Prince Vasili, but saw her whole body merely covered by a grey dress. But no, why did this thought not occur to me before? And again he said to himself that it was impossible, that there would be something vile, unnatural, as it seemed to him, and dishonest in this marriage. He recalled her former words and looks, and the words and looks of those who had seen them together. He recalled the words and looks of Anna Pavlovna when she spoke to him about his house, recalled hundreds of similar hints from Prince Vasili and others, and a terror came over him at the thought that he might already have bound himself in some way to go through with something which was obviously not good and which he ought not to do. But while he expressed this realization to himself, on the other side of his soul, her image floated up in all its feminine beauty. And that is the end of section 1, and we will stop it there today, which I know it seems a little short, but I think the next section will also be a bit longer, and don't want to take up too much of your day, especially as we've already gone a little late. So, see you again tomorrow, this time properly at 3. Thank you for tuning in, and there's always the War and Peace playlist on my channel if you need to catch up with anything, if you can't quite remember like who Prince Vasili is or Pierre. Now that we've jumped back to Moscow and Petersburg and returned to Pierre, who was the bastard son of Count Bezukhov, who has indeed inherited the fortune and been recognized as a legitimate heir and son. And so everyone's behavior towards him in society has suddenly shifted from one of quiet contempt maybe, or overlooking him, sort of, to suddenly much affection and admiration for. And Pierre, who seems like sort of a nice guy, also seems a little bit dense about things. Not very, and definitely not aware of the way people's attitudes to him have suddenly shifted, along with the timely inheritance of this fortune. So rather interesting. And we'll see Prince Vasili's angling for Pierre to marry his daughter, and looks like he already feels like maybe he needs to. So we'll see where that leads. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Again, sorry for the tardiness, and we'll see you tomorrow. Happy Thursday.